Welcome, everybody. If you're watching live, as always, please feel free to ask any questions along the way. If you think you might like to join me yourself one day, please do get in contact. My details on the channel's About page. On the 31st of January next week, we'll be talking with Bradley Gawthrop. But today's guest is Joe Grand, aka Kingpin.
Hello.
Joe. How are you doing?
Good seeing you.
Yeah, and you. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, of course.
Would you just like to introduce yourself quickly? Who are you? What do you do? For those who
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess the short version. My name is Joe Grand. I am a hacker and a computer engineer, and somehow have been able to make a living doing what I love and teaching people about hacking and electronics. And welcome to my lab.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I think first things first, we better discuss the missing E on your name.
Yeah, I like to. Yeah, so Grand is actually my last name, and a lot of times people are like, "Is that really your name?" I'm like, "Yeah," and but of course, a lot of people spell it Grande. So
Yeah.
When I introduce myself, or if I'm on the phone and they're like, "What's your name?" I say Grand, like $1,000, not like a burrito. and they get it. Yeah.
So it's funny. I'm not sure about you over in America, but in the UK, Grand is a very uncommon name, and I don't think I know anyone apart from direct family with my surname. So it's it's quite
interesting.
Funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Anyway,
right. Maybe our families are related like hundreds of years ago or something.
Maybe I dropped the E in the C or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as I always like to start at sort of childhood and hear how people got to where they are today. Are you okay to just sort of give us a quick rundown of what you did back then as a child?
Sure. So got involved in computers in 1982 when I was 7 years old, and this was a time where home computing was very new, and as a kid, I just gravitated towards it. I loved it. I loved the fact that you had this thing, you could type programs on it, and it would do what you wanted. At the same time, I loved electronics. I have an older brother who was into electronics, so I would just like being able to physically look at a circuit board and see what the different things did. So basically spent my entire childhood in what we called the computer room, which was this tiny kind of closet sized room with a wooden door as the table. And I had my Atari 400 giant, CRT television and a bunch of 5 1/4 inch floppy disks. And an acoustic coupler modem. So a 300 baud modem. Yeah. And that was my life from age 7 until probably 13 or so, when I started meeting. I mean, I was involved in bulletin board systems, but at that point, being a teenager is when I really started interacting more with other kind of hackers on a more serious basis.
Okay. So how did you find out about this scene? Because I guess back then it was quite underground. It's not something that, unless your parents maybe introduced you or similar.
Yeah.
How did you find out about it in the first place?
Yeah. So it was definitely underground, but even anybody who was into computers, right? You would just find whatever bulletin board systems you could. So I remember I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and there was a bulletin board system called the Boston Computer Society, which was like a computer, users group. So I remember being on there, and I would be on every possible user group kind of Boston area thing I could within my local calling area, because phone calls cost money back then. And I don't remember which bulletin board system it was, but I ended up finding one that sort of specialized in trading games, right? So copying games, you'd share games. And the games were very small, because on a 300 baud modem, I remember waking up in the morning before school, getting onto a bulletin board system, starting a download, going to school, coming back, and the file would be done. But it was a couple 100K at the most, kilobytes, to get the game. But yeah, I think, and maybe it was through my brother, how I discovered the first kind of pirate bulletin board system. So I started trading games, 8, 9, 10 years old, and it all seemed normal, right? It was as a kid, you just want to gather stuff. It's like other kids maybe have baseball card collection or whatever. I collected video games. And then seeing the crack screens and all the graphics and the art on those was just super cool. And somehow I just got into sort of more of the, I guess, less of the game copying and more of what other information can you share with people? And I liked it because I was a nerd and still am a nerd. And, it wasn't very liked in school for being involved in computers,
Right.
It wasn't a cool thing. Now it's oh, you have professional video game players that are rock stars. Back then you basically got your butt kicked on a fairly regular basis, or got teased and made fun of and harassed. And at the same time, I also got into skateboarding. So I was called like a scrub because I was dressed, I was into punk rock and all this stuff. Basically everything that nobody else liked is what I was into.
Okay.
So the hacker world basically gave me this kind of control of like, not only do I have copies of games, but I have passwords to systems that I shouldn't have. And I have information that I shouldn't have. And I have credit cards that I shouldn't have. And I can connect to, crazy systems, and had this power that other kids didn't have. And I think that's really what gave me this confidence of like, this is my world. Like the computer is my world. I don't care what you do outside of it. But the computer is for me. And that's kind of where it really set everything off from there.
That's awesome. So, it started with bulletin board systems and things. And as you say, you quickly got into sort of poking at the edges and figuring out how you could break things in a useful way, maybe? Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, that came later.
Okay.
So basically, as I started trading more information, I ended up discovering kind of local hacker bulletin board systems. And that's where I ended up meeting people that I still know to this day. And there was just a lot of really interesting information sharing. I got a lot into sort of credit card fraud, I guess you could say, as a 13, 14-year-old, making free phone calls because connecting to long distance bulletin board systems was not cheap. And I did have one phone bill, I think when I was like 10, that I called someplace in New York City. So it was like not that far away, but far enough away. It was a pretty significant bill. And I think every hacker from this era sort of had that one milestone of like, okay, I had a big telephone bill. I can't afford that. How am I going to continue to do this? And that's when I figured out how to make free phone calls. But yeah, I got a lot into sort of credit cards. So
what was the sort of the thing that drew you to credit cards? Was it just having the information that you shouldn't have? Or
yeah, I mean, again, it was this power thing, but it was also I've always been mischievous, whether on the computer or not. And I always had this mindset, and it may have just been my way of acting out as a kid. But it seemed very faceless, like getting somebody's credit card information. And I would go through dumpsters a lot of times. So what we call trashing, jumping in the dumpster and going through like office trash to try to find credit card receipts and things, maybe from a retailer, or I would go to like Cellular One, which was a early cell phone provider, and find like the ESN and MIN pairs that I could use to clone a cell phone. But it was mostly like, it felt very faceless because these were giant corporations. I didn't feel like I was stealing or doing anything wrong. It was just like, oh, I got a credit card, let's go use it. And the owner of the credit card is going to get reimbursed from the bank. So it just seemed normal. Yeah. And as a teenager, like in my head, it never even occurred to me that it would have been illegal, or that it would have really annoyed the owner of the credit card, because I've had my credit card stolen so many times since then, which I kind of attribute to karma. And it just, it happens, but it's, it all just seemed normal. I think being involved in that community, and I was hacking all the time and on bulletin board systems all the time. And that was my community. Again, like I had some skateboarding friends, but none of us, were sort of accepted by our school or parents or anybody else. So it was just a way of kind of making my footprint, which is easy to say looking back now, right? Like at the time I had no idea what I was doing, but now like analyzing how did I get into that? Like, why was I into all of these things that nobody else liked? Is just, I think having that knowledge and that power that other kids didn't really is what I liked, and trying to get as much information, even if I didn't use it. There was a lot of stuff I didn't use, but I have these books. I don't have them with me. They're hiding somewhere else. When I was a kid, I would write down all the passwords and everything in these little books, and I still have them. And it was like filling up those books and trading stuff. Like that was the best, is just to have information and then be known as somebody that can provide information to others, right? It's like, oh, nice. Kingpin has the blah, blah, blah. You should trade him. And it's like, well, I'm going to trade you, but I need some codes to make a long distance call or to set up an Alliance teleconference to have a group chat, because there was no Discord where everybody could just have a group chat. Like we were basically, a bunch of teenage kids stealing phone service or stealing something to get phone calls so we could all talk to each other and cause trouble and make prank phone calls and all this stuff. And it was just a very I thought it was a very innocent time.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that everybody says that too, of like, there were some computer crime laws and some people got busted. Some friends of mine did. I eventually did as well. But it was my teenage years was being a hacker, and what I would consider in not really a malicious way like you would see today.
Sure.
Right? Like there was no ransomware, and I would never want to inflict something like that on somebody. Like the mindset was
absolutely.
a lot different,
Yeah,
and it wasn't
yeah.
about making money. It wasn't about anything like that. It was just my curiosity and my way of kind of sticking it to the world at large, but not in a destructive way at all.
Sure. Okay. So the word hacking is often sort of misunderstood, misused almost in media and sort of at large. Can you define what it really meant for you back then?
Yeah. So what it meant for me back then and what it still means to me,
Okay. Yeah.
a hacker really is somebody who kind of approaches problems or solves problems in interesting ways. And I know that's kind of like, oh, it's so generic. And even like as I got older, when I got arrested and then ended up joining the Loft, which was a publicly facing hacker group, and we really were spreading the good side of what hackers can do in that terminology of like hackers are solving problems and doing things that original designers hadn't thought about. The media had already at that point, even back in the 80s, like really early 80s with the 414s and some early hacker groups, we're using hacker in this negative connotation. And myself and the people I was around always wanted to sort of take back that name and not have it be malicious, even though at the time some of us were doing sort of, questionable things, but it still, to me, just is all about like being curious and wanting to solve technical problems and maybe doing it in a way that your friends go, ooh, that's cool. Like that's a cool hack, right? Like solving something. And now we see like life hacks and gardening hacks and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, the name is overused, but whatever. It's like the more that it gets out there that it can be hacking maybe is just an alternate way of thinking is great, because that really is what it comes down to.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you mentioned you got arrested. I think that was about age 16, was it?
Yep.
Can you kind of fill us in on the little story around that and what had happened in the lead up and sort of what you're up to?
Yeah. So 1992, I got arrested. And at that time, I was part of a hacker group called Renegade Legion. And if you actually go to textfiles.com and go through some of the old text files, you can see like a bunch of text files that we had released. Credit card fraud in the 90s, how to access credit bureau, like all these things, different groups of kids were writing different files. And we had all met on bulletin board systems. And I think we, spent a lot of time on Alliance teleconferences together. We were all over the country, but we would spend hours and hours and hours every night hanging out. And it just, it felt like we knew each other, even though we'd never met each other in person. Which is nowadays, a lot of people who are gaming online or talking online in different Discord communities or, whatever, don't meet in person. Right. But back then it was, most everything was person to person contact. Yeah. But this wasn't, but we felt like we all knew each other and we were part of this hacker group. Again, it was mostly like writing text files and prank calling people that we liked or didn't like. And just generally causing, mischief. We'd connected one time on a big group chat. We'd connected a bunch of different directory assistance operators around the country together. So they'd say, Boston directory assistance, how can I help you? And then someone else would answer. It'd be like, Texas directory assistance. So then it was all these telephone operators communicating and talking to each other, which we thought was funny. And the story of getting in trouble, basically, some of us thought it would be a great idea to get together during winter break. We were all in high school. I think some of the guys maybe were a little bit older, but during a winter break that lined up with all of us, we thought it'd be great to get together, meet in person, hang out at this one guy's house, play video games, do whatever. And we didn't have this grand scheme of what we were going to do. And my parents said, sure, like, yeah, we'll let you fly out to Michigan from Boston.
I was going to ask after the end of the story, after you'd been arrested, what your parents thought, and was this news to them?
Yeah, well, they were, let's just say they were very hands off by the time I came around. And this was like, but nobody was going there like, we're going to go break into, like we just wanted to get together. And it started off innocently that way. But yeah, so my parents paid for my flight. I flew out to Michigan, met all these other people there, hung out at this one guy's house, which was a lot of fun. And then, we're sitting around and we're like, hey, let's go screw with Ma Bell. Because that's what kids did. Like the telephone network was, pre-internet. That was the network that everybody explored and screwed around with. And like the early phone freaks from like the 70s and Captain Crunch and, Joy Bubbles and all these people had been sort of the forebearers of that. And then we were coming in exploring. And the telephone companies were these massive faceless corporations that had a giant network that we were all curious about. So we wanted to get information. So we're like, hey, let's go break into the phone company building and steal documentation and steal hardware equipment that we could use. And we're like, okay, like, let's go do it.
Yeah. It's kind of a information gathering almost more than like destruction or anything.
Oh,
it was purely
total information gathering. It was the curiosity and like trying to access, just like when I was younger, trying to get information that other people didn't have. There was a bragging kind of element to the hacker world at the time. And I'm sure there still is today, right? Of like, oh, Kingpin has that phone manual. Like, how do you get that? Or you have the X90 lineman handset or the New England telephone hat over there. Maybe I should be wearing that actually.
Yeah, I could grab it.
So, it's like, if you have a hard hat from the phone company, that's hardcore, right? You wear this to a hacker meetup or something, and like all of a sudden you're the best. You're the Kingpin. So that's what we were going for, of like, documentation that could maybe give us more access into the phone network, cool pieces of hardware. And we, drove up. It was at night. We planned this whole heist and ultimately got arrested. Our plan didn't quite go through as we thought it would. The details of that will eventually come out in some way. I'm thinking of like some sort of story at some point. But yeah, so we ended up getting in trouble, and some of the guys actually went to jail.
Right.
I think I was actually the only one under 18. So that really saved me, because the police basically didn't want to go through a whole other set of like juvenile delinquent stuff.
Right.
So they talked to my local police station. They talked to my parents, basically laid down some rules, and the local cops were watching me. So I basically got a slap on the wrist, and they're like, if you screw up again, you're going to get in big trouble. And I had like a police car surveilling me for a while outside of my house. I remember coming home from school, and it would be obviously there, unmarked police car. So I would like go around the block to go into the house. They didn't know I was in the house. And they were watching me to make sure I didn't screw up again. And
that's amazing. I
got very, very lucky.
Surprised that they gave you that kind of attention.
Yeah. I mean, I was facing a lot of charges,
right?
Because they'll just tack on whatever, to the whole thing. But it was, that was a huge, huge turning point, right? Because here I am, a 16-year-old kid, love technology, love hacking. And even up to that point, it's surprising that I didn't get in trouble before then, or get caught, I guess I should say. But I loved everything about it except getting in trouble. So as luck would have it, around that same time, even before that, like kind of in parallel, there was a bunch of Boston area hackers where I grew up that were older than me, at least 6 years older than me. We'd have kind of gatherings. We called them grillathons back in the day, and basically meetups before they were called meetups. And a bunch of us from Bulletin Board Systems would meet. And a bunch of those guys had started a group called the Loft, which was basically a clubhouse that they could store all of their computer stuff and hack on things. And basically their significant others wanted all of the technology out of the house. So they got this loft space, like this artist space, little warehouse. So that had been going already for maybe like 6 months or a year or something. And I'd been in touch with all of them, of course, and hung out with them because of being a hacker in that area. And after I got arrested, they're like, hey, do you want to join the Loft? And the way that they told it to me of like, well, we knew that, we wanted to have you in there, but you just had to get all that dumb stuff out of your system.
Okay.
And they were totally right. And then after that, it's like, that's where that turning point happened of, I can continue to do technology and do what I love to do, but do it in a more controlled environment. I had a place to go, so I wasn't out causing trouble. It was this clubhouse that I could go to after school. I could go there at midnight, wherever I wanted. and we'd have our computer systems and we'd have our own networks and our own hardware. And it was just a place that now I didn't have to go cause trouble somewhere else. And it essentially saved me, besides, of course, not being put in jail the first time.
Right.
But having that environment and having that outlet as a kid where everybody else was older and seemed more responsible was amazing. And again, my parents knew that I wasn't going to just stop doing what I was doing. So they ended up paying for the rent. It was like 25 bucks a month or something like that. And they helped pay for my portion. After, of course, I had to reimburse them for the flights to Michigan to go to court, to go to court and all of that stuff, because I had to go back, of course, for all that stuff. But yeah, so they supported me in that way, and that was a huge turning point. That's basically what set me on my trajectory for where I am today. Is the Loft.
Awesome, fantastic.
I guess I can take this off now too. This is getting hot.
End of story. I'm sure we'll talk about the Loft again in a bit, but at about this kind of time, you went to uni. Let's just talk about that a bit.
Sure. So yeah, so as I was doing, hacking, I'd always wanted to be an engineer. You couldn't be a hacker. Like that was just something people did for fun, or to cause trouble. But every time, somebody would ask like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always wanted to be an engineer. And I don't know why that is. It could have just been because I'd loved reading through the magazines and seeing projects and loving being able to create something in your head and then have a physical manifestation of that. But I knew very, very early. And when it came time to go to college, I ended up going to Boston University, which was still in Boston. And the only reason I stayed there is because I was already part of the Loft, because I joined there in high school and I wanted to stay in the Loft. So I stayed in Boston for college.
Right.
And started out with an electrical engineering path. And then my second year in, this new thing came out called computer engineering, which was basically, electrical engineering and computer science crammed together, like the good pieces of both without all the boring stuff around it. And I was like, this is it. Like, I didn't know that had a name because I was already doing microcontroller development and building circuit boards and all this stuff on my own. But the fact that it had a name and it had a degree you could get, it was like, all right, computer engineering, that's what it is. Having this low level hardware experience. I loved it. Yeah, I loved everything about it. Some of the teachers weren't great, as always, but I think, being a hacker, I always had that sort of DIY self-learning kind of mindset anyway. So I had to teach myself a lot of the stuff that the teachers weren't, or the professors weren't great at teaching. Looking back at it, like they probably just wanted to do research. They didn't want to have to teach kids a class about physics or linear algebra or whatever over and over and over again.
Right.
So I get it. And had one professor senior year, David Peralt, who ran a company, P&E Microsystems. I hope that's right. Who made all of the development hardware for Motorola microcontrollers.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty cool. So he was teaching and then running this company at the same time.
Okay.
So he turned me on to Motorola parts, 68, HC05, HC08. So we started using those in school. And then after school, I started using Motorola, and then it went to Freescale and NXP and Microchip. But yeah, just really loved that path. At that same time too, one of the things I didn't mention is when I got in trouble, my parents, besides letting me join the Loft, were like, you either have to do a sport or get a job. Like you have to stay busy. Because when you're not busy is when bad things happen.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to work. And actually I did try working. I did some dog walking jobs, but got bit by a dog on one of the jobs. So I was like, oh, forget it. Work is not for me. And I had a couple friends that were running track that were not computer friends, just regular friends from elementary school that were in high school together. And also in Michigan, there was something else that we did. I realized I could run pretty fast. That we didn't get caught for. So I was like, yeah, sure. I'll just run track. So I was running track. It kind of kept me out of trouble, tired me out. And then when I was doing stuff at the Loft in the evenings and everything, it was just much more like relaxed. So it was a very good thing. Starting to run track, cross country, met people that weren't computer people. So what I would consider like normal people. And then in college also, I walked on to run cross country and track and field at a Division I school, which was like way over my head. Like I'm a computer nerd that happens to run okay. And here I am with like national caliber, people from all over the world, essentially coming scholarship to these races and everything. And it it was fun. But again, like being the underdog, that's how I was.
Yep.
And I was not just I was a hacker that happened to run, right? I wasn't a runner that was there. So it was fun. Like I was a little bit on the edge of that scene, and people were like, why is he here? But it was really, really fun. Taught me a lot of things that I use also in my kind of day-to-day life, and ended up eventually meeting my wife through track and field as well. So sort of computers and exercise, I guess, were the two things that kind of, saved me.
Yeah. Very nice. I just realized we haven't spoken about your handle yet, Kingpin. Yeah.
It's funny because
and was that in use sort of as at the beginning, or is it something you've grown into?
No, it's funny because like my kids are going through this right now, with changing their nicknames on Minecraft and Fortnite and Discord and all of that stuff, where I almost feel like if you're presented with the opportunity to call yourself something else, people will jump at that. So for me as a kid, being a hacker, you didn't use your real name. It was like, no way, unless you wanted to go to jail or get in trouble. We were all anonymous. Everybody was anonymous using fake names, except for the people on like the user group bulletin board systems who were using their real name because they weren't causing any trouble. So my first nickname was Black Ninja when I was 7 years old. And I still have a binder printed out, like a 3-ring binder with printouts of all of the games I had, all the software and like which discs they were on and everything. And it says Black Ninja's file list. And I still have that, which is pretty epic. The marker is kind of worn off a little bit, but that's really cool. And I had that from probably 7 until 13 or so. And then as a teenager, I'm like, well, everybody wants to be a ninja. I got into the Misfits as a, kind of horror punk band. And I was into different styles of punk and hardcore music, underground music. And so in honor of the Misfits, I chose a name Astro Zombie, which was one of their songs. I went through a couple other ones. I think at one point I was FBI agent, which is like the least creative name. And I don't know why I would call myself that, because that was like a certain way to just get kicked out of every IRC channel. FBI agent. But yeah, kind of went through a lot of them, which is again funny because that's what my kids are going through right now, of kind of finding their identity of like what name fits them the best. And ultimately chose Kingpin. For one reason, nobody else had it in the scene, so there was no possibility of any sort of collision. And it was a name of a band in Boston that I liked. That was in the early 90s. It was part of a skateboard, and the character in Spider-Man. Not that I was a comic fan, but just the persona of the Kingpin character in the Marvel Spider-Man series as this like badass criminal. I just liked it. So that name stuck. And like, I think other people have much cooler names, but it is what it is. Like it would have been cooler if somebody gave me a name, right? Of like, I'm going to call you the whatever. But back then you just chose your own name, and Kingpin stuck. And I basically used that until I was, I think 23 or 24, until I was outed in the media by a fellow, hacker from the Loft. Thanks, Mudge. And just kidding. That we're okay with that. But that was like the time of going straight, right? Of like people now knew my name, which also meant at the same time, like it's got to be a lot more careful about what you do, because when we started doing kind of hacker as a good side at the Loft, we were finding vulnerabilities in Microsoft and various hardware platforms and this and that, and companies were really pissed. So you didn't want to use your real name to make it easy for them to find you. But eventually in like early 2000s, more people started using their real name. And once I got outed, I was like, okay, that's actually not bad. Like seeing Kingpin as the author of a paper is one thing, but then seeing your own real name is like, okay, that's cool. Like I guess it probably ended up being for the better that way. But I still like friends of mine will still call me KP, like hacker friends of mine, which is cool.
Yeah, awesome, very cool. So let's dive into the Loft again.
Sure.
As you mentioned just now, you were sort of vulnerability type research, I guess, looking into.
Yeah, it was very loose.
What else did you get up to?
So this was this was at a time where you still couldn't be a hacker full time, and we were just curious about kind of poking the beehive, is what we used to call it. We all used Windows, we all used Linux and other things, and like find a security problem. And basically there was mailing lists and you could announce it to the world. We would try to get the companies to be responsive. So, a lot of times people say that we're like the kind of founders of full disclosure or whatever. Responsible disclosure is what they call it now. But we basically were like, here's a problem. Here's how it works. We suggest you fix this within X amount of days. Otherwise, we're going to release it.
Okay.
And that's what we did. And it wasn't very well received at the beginning, especially from people in the more traditional computer security field at that point, who used their real names. We're like, who are these people causing all this trouble? But now we see it took 20 something years. But we see Apple, we see Microsoft with Patch Tuesdays and security updates, and finding vulnerabilities is a huge business, right? You can like actually have a career just doing that.
Yeah.
Where we were doing it for free because it was fun to do.
So when you say
Loft,
sort of
the
traditional,
Loft was like, it was a clubhouse. We would sell things at flea markets, and it was like a place to just hang out.
Yep.
Which is awesome. Oh, I should mention too, before I forget. So one of our guys, Space Rogue, also known as Chris Thomas on his on Mastodon and on Twitter, but he is at Space Rog, I believe. He just wrote a book that's in pre-order about his perspective of the Loft in those days and at Stake. So if you really want to see a first-person account of somebody who was there, because a lot of stuff happened, a lot of drama, going from like hackers to a corporate environment was not really recommended. But a great learning experience. So his book is on pre-order and is really the first account of any of us besides interviews actually telling the story of those days, which is very influential. And a lot of people who came out of that hacker world have done amazing things in companies that you would not expect.
Right. Very cool. Thank you for mentioning him. I might try and grab a link off you later and put it in the show notes if that's okay. So you mentioned just now sort of more traditional security. I don't know if researcher was the right term back then, but what was that and how did it contrast to what you lot were up to?
Yeah. So, there'd been computer security professionals in organizations probably since the 70s, if not even earlier. I remember finding a paper once about computer security in government in like 1970 something about mainframe computers and how you could have bad actors, steal information and sniff communications and all these things that we do now as, hardware hackers, but on a much bigger scale. So it's been a thing, but those were like kind of a more traditional job, I would say, but hackers are kind of coming at it as a different way. And I think that's what we were doing at the Loft, of kind of showing, and even after the fact, where I'd found vulnerabilities and things also, of like, it's nice to have another set of eyes on things is I think what it comes down to. And the people within the companies were maybe thinking about security a certain way, but they weren't thinking about how a hacker would do it or something like that. So we just brought
it's more kind of like forward engineering versus reverse engineering, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think also we just sort of, hackers kind of bring more of that, like, I wouldn't say an anarchist perspective, but it's just a non-traditional, troublemaker. Yeah. It's just something different. And that's what I found out with teaching nowadays, which is what I primarily do, is teach hardware hacking, and do all the other fun engineering stuff just for fun. And the teaching is fun as well. But what I've learned is that the hacker mindset, like real hackers think differently than other people, right? And that's why they can solve problems in different ways or maybe approach things in different ways. And when I teach my classes, anybody can be taught how to use a tool, right? But it's like trying to teach somebody why to use the tool in this situation or how to approach a problem in a certain way. So with my classes, it's more of like teaching that hacker mindset and how looking at products, how you can think about constraints of like the original product designer and all of these things, not really about just the technical usage of the tool. And I think that's what hackers can bring to the table, is just that different outside perspective. And I think it's probably safe to say too, that a lot of hackers, especially back in the day and maybe now, a lot of us probably aren't suited for traditional corporate jobs and maybe don't want to be surrounded by people all the time or deal with the politics, but still want to contribute something. And I think being a hacker now, and the fact that you can have a career out of it if you play your cards the right way and are transparent and honest and ethical in what you do, you can really provide something that a more normal type of person isn't going to see, or normal type of company. So it's awesome. I mean, it's amazing that it's as big as it is now, and that that a lot of us can do what we love to do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Great. I'll just bring up some chat messages quickly. So a matter of time before talking about Loft.Mudge would come up. Loft cracked saving multiple times legitimately as a Windows XP admin. So
that's a great point. So at the Loft, what we wanted to start doing is we were all there as a clubhouse, and we first started making money by getting equipment out of like dumpsters and going to MIT and other universities in the area, because Massachusetts had tons of colleges and universities, and we would get equipment that was discarded, and we'd either use it at the Loft or we would clean it up and resell it at the MIT flea market. So we were all about just being self-sufficient. And over time, as hackers started becoming more kind of popular, we were selling T-shirts, and we were selling the black crawling systems, CD, and the Whack Mac archives. So we were selling things to make money. And Loft crack happened. I think it was originally something that Welder Mudge was writing as like a command line tool for analysis of Windows. He found some weakness in, like, I think it was like landman hashes or something, wrote this tool as kind of a proof of concept. And then that turned into something where hackers actually were using it for like legitimate jobs, right? Of verifying password security within their organizations. As as with any tool, right? We say this all the time too. It's like, my favorite is like, you can have a hammer to build a house, or you can have a hammer to like smash somebody over the head. It's all about how you use the tool. And Loft crack was exactly like that. So to see that comment of like, people are reusing this, and that ended up becoming a professional product. And then there was the open source version, and that, went over to AtStake, and then it came back after AtStake got sold to Symantec and all this stuff. But it, it's like anything I do even today. I wasn't involved in Loft crack, but other things that I was working on, POC-SAG decoder at the Loft and other things. And every product I've done since then, every project I've done since then is something that I've wanted to do that I think benefits, at least that I need for something, benefits me in some way of doing a project or something. And then the hope is by releasing that, other people can use that and get inspired and build on it for something, right? So it's just all about kind of building this snowball of knowledge for people. And that's what I learned at the Loft, how important it is to share information and write papers or give presentations. And I found out, like, I hate writing 100%, which is why if anybody ever emails me, they don't get a response. That's why, because I can't do it. But I love speaking, and I love being on stage, and I love having technical presentations and conversations. So for me, it's more of that spoken way, but sharing that information is what lets other people get inspired. And then they go do something that goes and inspires somebody else, who inspires somebody else. And that's the thing about the maker community, the engineering community, the hacker community, that I think is very special. Not everybody adheres to that, right? A lot of times people like to make their own thing and say it's proprietary and not share it. But I think there's more value in releasing as much as you can and then letting other people do stuff with it, because that's how I learned, and that's how other people will learn. So that's something, even with the wallet hacking stuff, which we can get into later if you want. But like, there's a lot of, I've released some videos, but I haven't really released a lot of the details. I had a presentation I put some stuff in, but I'm planning to release more of that stuff once it's cleaned up and I have a much better, more refined process and some hardware that makes it easier. But all that stuff will go out there so other people can do the same stuff and learn from that, and then break the next generation of things, and that's what it's all about.
Nice. Very cool. So we've mentioned AtStake a couple of times, but before that, you came out of uni directly into a product development company.
Yes.
How did you find that, just very quickly, and then we'll move
on? So actually during college, I was also, besides the Loft, I was working kind of on and off at an engineering product development company called Design Continuum that was started by a family friend of ours who was an engineer. And my brother had worked there as a teenager as like a lab tech building electronics. And I kind of was helping with like IT, like updating Windows and helping people with whatever computer stuff through college. And one time they called me in and they had a project, an engineering project. It was actually for the AT Cross, which was like a fancy pen company. They called it the iPen. So it was basically like an Apple stylus, but in 1996 or something. Right. And they got the circuit boards back for the product they designed, and it wasn't working. And they were freaking out because they only had one electrical engineer there. And I think he was like on vacation or something. And called me up and they're like, can you just come and look at this thing? And it was a little like kind of microcontroller based device. So I looked at the design, I looked at the boards that came back, and realized that there was supposed to be edge plating on the board because basically like the pen had a spring on it, and that's how it would detect if you're pressing down. And the edge plating around the circuit board wasn't there because the circuit board fabricator screwed up.
Okay.
Once we realized that there was no edge plating, we got a conductive ink pen and fixed all that stuff up for the prototype. And apparently it was this massive life project saving thing because the customer is coming in like the next day or whatever. But I didn't really care because I just got called in and did it. They did end up giving me like an envelope full of cash. And I was like, oh, I guess that's pretty cool. So when I graduated, that became like a legendary thing in the company. So when I graduated and wanted to go work at a company, even before, by the way, after I graduated, I spent about a year doing like Palm OS, PDA, software development, and I was writing different programs and kind of like apps, on the iPhone. I loved the Palm Pilot, Dragon Ball MC 68000, 68328. Was writing software for that and basically like making a little bit of money doing shareware types of things. But yeah, went over to design continuum, and I was like, I want to be an engineer and I want to, work full time, and had the proper interviews and everything, but they'd already known me because of my brother and because of my connection to the founder. And the co-CEO at the time, when I was doing my interview, walks by and sees me and points to the people that were talking to me and said, "Hire Joe." So it's like, what are they going to do? They can't not hire me. And that was amazing. I mean, to be a basically a college graduate being thrown into a professional product development company these guys had developed the Reebok pump, all sorts of crazy stuff. If you go, I think they changed their name to Continuum Innovation, but they're still designing amazing things. A lot of biomedical. I'd worked on an infusion pump, a portable infusion pump, actually the world's first portable infusion pump for 2 years with an 8051 and actually a Dragon Ball 68328 because I was so in love with Palm Pilot. We ended up using that and learned all about everything from prototyping, which I had kind of done on my own anyway, through production manufacturing, through testing, FDA testing, learning about what contract manufacturers needed as far as, documentation and circuit board layouts and everything. I mean, it was like this amazing experience. I learned more in those couple of years of engineering at Design Continuum than I had in 4 years of college, for sure. It was such a great thing. And the customers we were working with also were very helpful in guiding me as I was designing their circuit boards and designing their schematics and building prototypes. It was amazing. And I probably still would have been there if it wasn't for us at the Loft deciding to go and start at Stake, which was one of the first computer security consulting companies, which sounded great at the time. Nobody was really doing that as far as consulting with companies to help them be secure. I didn't want to be a consultant. I loved doing it from an engineering perspective, but I just wanted to hack. And at the Loft, we just wanted to be hackers full time, which wasn't a thing back then. People thought we were crazy when we were like, we want to hack full time and we want to do research full time and we'll teach other people about it. People are like, you're nuts. Like if you're not billing hours, you're not worthy. And Space Rogue actually goes into that in his book about that whole story. But we basically became the research group. The Loft became the research group of this At Stake, this venture capital backed security consulting company. We thought was this all of you? Just you were all at your own jobs and you just decided to quit? We all quit our jobs. Decided to just go for it. This was at the .com, 1999, 2000. We could see like some of our friends were starting to get jobs in kind of computer security as more hacker type. We're like, let's just do it. Let's go for it. And we kind of danced around with a couple other companies and settled on this one. I wouldn't say settled, agreed on this one because it had what we thought was a very, competent group of other people, which turns out to not really be the case. But it was a really good lesson because we went in as this hacker group, right? This flat hierarchy, 7 hackers. Actually, at the time, I think by then we had 8 going into, or maybe 9 going in. And now all of a sudden we have bosses and schedules and deadlines and appearances we had to make outside of the lab so people knew we were still there. The CEO one time was like, so Joe, can you just come in and walk through the consulting area and like put your jacket on a chair so people know you're there?
Oh no.
I'm like, that's the dumbest thing ever. Like, why should other people care if I'm there? Like I'm downstairs hacking on stuff. So it was very interesting. but I learned how, the importance, first of all, of working with friends. Doesn't always go as planned, because that really kind of ruined our relationship with each other.
Right.
Even though some of us are still in contact, but it really strained that for a long time. And because I think people's true colors came out, and also everybody had different responsibilities at the time. And, as a kid growing up in the loft, this very formative time, and then being thrust into that with your friends and stuff, it was just being told what to do by friends. I just didn't like it. And then, Space Rogue got fired, Brian Oblivion got fired, I quit, and didn't want anything to do with hacking anymore. Right. But it really shows like how bad management can ruin anything, right? You could have an amazing group of people, and some of the consultants that we had, like the other people within At Stake, also went on to do amazing stuff. But if you don't have a good coach, or you don't have a good mentor, or you don't have a good executive team that knows how to wrangle all of us as very unique individuals, it's not going to work. So that was a really interesting lesson. But basically, I think that kind of ruined me as far as trust in a lot of ways. And since then, I only work with, very rarely do I work with other people. When I do, they're very trusted. Right. And they have a long history. I've worked with them, or through a friend, a trusted friend, I meet somebody. But I've been on my own running Grand Idea Studio since the end of 2002. And I love it. It's also a little bit isolating sometimes, right? Because there is something fun about going to a space and hanging out with people and socializing. And my wife and my kids go nuts, because I'll be in here for, hours and hours, and then I'll run inside and just be like, blah, 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 blah. Like, they know all my drama and emails I get and everything, because I need to vent to somebody. But at the same time, like, I love the freedom and being able to work. I was just telling my wife the other day, I'm working with a friend of mine right now on trying to fine tune some STM32 kind of attacks and things that have been done before, but getting it to a point that is actually like reasonable for most people to do, and in a safe way. So working with him, it's been amazing. Like, he's in Belgium, so the time is switched. So I'm up until like 2 or 3 in the morning hacking on stuff. He's up late in my morning. And when you find people like that, it makes it really, really fun. And like, I'm having a blast working with him to create this stuff. And it's all about just like solving these problems and really fun technical things with no purpose other than like having a really good process that we can then go, hopefully, release the information, give a talk. And again, get that information out there. But it's like such a satisfying thing to use your brain in that way to kind of kick the door down of products that aren't expecting you to do that.
Sure. So that's Grand Idea Studio. And are there any other things that you do? Can you just sort of outline a summary rather than specific projects or anything?
Yeah. So, I mean, Grand Idea Studio is like my company, right? So when I started it, after leaving At Stake, I was like, I need to look like a big company. Right. Nobody is going to take me seriously. Like, if I try to get components, or if I want to buy something, nobody's going to listen to me if they know I'm like a 24-year-old kid working out of the basement. So I formed the company. It gave me some legal structure, but that was really, I started doing engineering consulting work. And I did that for a while. And then again, as security started becoming more common, training started happening. So Black Hat started doing trainings at their conference in 2005 or 2004. And then I started doing hardware hacking trainings in 2005. Companies started realizing, oh, we should be, letting our employees continue to learn things. So I started doing more training than consulting. And I got out of consulting because it was very, very time consuming. Right. And I get really focused on things, and I can only really do one thing at a time. So it was taking a lot of time. And it just got to the point where a lot of, everybody wanted their stuff to look like Apple. And I was like, I can't do that as one person. Like, I can do, I know what I'm good at, and it's not making things look like Apple.
Right.
So I think just the understanding of technology, as it got more pervasive in the world, people wanted it more without understanding how hard it was. So I just kind of stopped doing that, started doing more teaching. And then on the side, just kind of hacking on my own stuff. So once in a while, I made the JTagulator, which is a tool that will help you find debug interfaces on systems, things that I thought would be useful to make. and made a bunch of like hobbyist modules for Parallax that sold, and they could sell stuff because I don't like selling stuff. When I hacked the Trezor wallet recently, like basically right after COVID, a guy had contacted me, or during COVID, I guess, contacted me and was like, I'm locked out of my Trezor hardware wallet. It has $2 million on it. Can you help me hack it? And I hadn't gotten into fault injection. I hadn't paid attention really to cryptocurrency, but the timing was just right. Like I wasn't traveling. I wasn't doing anything. And my wife was like, you should, investigate that a little more. So I actually responded to him, and like that kind of set this other path of doing this project and spending 3 months learning about fault injection and trying to replicate existing work and trying to make it better and add my stuff to it, and ultimately hack this guy's wallet. We ended up filming it because a friend of mine is a filmmaker, and I told him about it. He's like, we need to film it.
Okay.
And then he also is an entrepreneur. And once he filmed it, he's like, we have to make a company out of this. And he was right. He's like, if this guy, Dan, who is, also an entrepreneur, technical person involved in cryptocurrency, if he forgot his PIN to his device, there's probably lots of other people that have problems being locked out of their cryptocurrency stuff. And of course, he was right. So we started a company, offspec.io, which is kind of a side, I call it a side project, even though, the other guys involved probably wouldn't like that because they want it to be full-time. But it's, we try to help people recover cryptocurrency from hardware devices, password cracking, whatever it needs to be. And some of the projects we can take on, some of them we can't. A lot of the emails we get are people who have been scammed in some way,
right?
Which I'm starting to now notice is a huge problem. But yeah, probably 80% of the emails we get, people have been scammed.
Wow. Okay.
And I hadn't really paid attention to cryptocurrency before this and didn't really know that world. And there's really good uses of, digital currency. And of course, cryptography being used in this way is really interesting. But the number of scams and the valuation of things, like it's just too new. And there's just so much noise and so many scams and so many impersonators. Like I've been impersonated a million times and it's super annoying and people fall for it. It's just, there's just too much crap out there for, I think, something really good to come of it. But yeah, so hack this wallet. And then we started this company, and we kind of pick and choose the stuff that we can do. Hardware is very time consuming for the research part, right? Once you get it to a point that you can do it over and over again, great. But a lot of the techniques we're using, like fault injection, you don't really know what's going to happen. You can try to control it as much as you can. But there are so many factors at play that you might end up erasing somebody's hardware wallet. And that's not really a great place to be. Software wallets are much easier. Like we have a team of people that are doing the password cracking stuff. And like, that's much better because you're not going to, if you mess up, you're not going to erase their wallet. You're just not going to find the password. But it's been really fun to kind of do that. And, for me, really, it's just using the same skills just to help people directly. And that's actually been kind of fun because, there's been times where we help somebody and they're like, first of all, you changed my life, right? Like this is a huge amount of money for me, whatever it is.
Right.
But also like the fact that they're like, we didn't think we'd ever see the money, or like, we didn't think you'd send it to us. So it's kind of validating. It's almost showing them like hackers are good, some of them, right? So it brings it all back around of like trying to spread that good side of the hacker world. But yeah, so did that also. The kind of as a side thing that happened is because I get emails all the time of like random proposals for things, and most of them I just ignore. But one was also, I don't remember if it was during COVID, but it was during a downtime. There wasn't a lot going on. I think we were still editing the video for the wallet hacking, so that hadn't blown up yet. And somebody from TDK contacted me and was like, hey, we saw your video, the pizza compass that you had released for Wired. So during COVID, I made a video about a pizza compass. So a hardware device that looked like a compass. It would tell you where the nearest pizza place was and sort of direct you to the pizza place on an artistic circuit board. Like that was really fun. They basically just left a camera with me, and you could tell like over the days, it was a 3-week project. So over the days I was getting like more and more kind of wacky because I was just alone filming. So TDK saw that and they're like, hey, can you do a project like that for us? Okay. And TDK being like a music company traditionally, and now of course they do electronic components and they're huge. I started looking through their stuff and I was like, I'm going to make a boombox, like have this throwback to TDK cassette tapes. It turns out they had these awesome little piezo element speakers that made music. You'd attach them to something that vibrate. And I'd never seen those before. So I'm like, if I'm going to do a project, I want to do it with technologies or things I haven't used before. So it just turned into this massive, like the pizza compass was small. The boombox is big, and I'll show you it in a second. It turned into this massive over-the-top project. We filmed it. We had breakdancers come at the end. The video is up now on YouTube as well. But here is for the engineers in the audience. This is the boombox.
Look at that.
It's as large of a panel as you can get. So a single panel circuit board, I think, is 24 by 18, and this is, I think, 22 by 16 because we needed the rail around it. To fit into the, to go down through the machine. So this is a single circuit board, which is the 1/8 inch thick part. And then we have this frame around it on the backside. That's just a thick FR4 just to kind of protect it. But all the circuitry is on the one board. It's a 4-layer board. Oh, that's a cool shot. Here, I'll look here. And I can see. So it's a 4-layer board with everything has via in pad. So it's all the traces are inside the board. So all you see is like the black. You don't see any, you see the solder mask, but you don't see any of the traces.
Very shiny.
They're all inside. Over here is, I think it's 7 or 8 layers of solder mask. And we had a friend of mine, Mar, design the artwork. They do a lot of art for kind of hacker world types of things. So they do a lot of stuff for DEF CON. And I contacted them and was like, hey, we're doing a boombox. Is there any way that you can do some artwork? And they're like, yeah. So it was awesome to work with them and have this awesome design. And we have these kind of VU meters here where there's no solder mask. So it's just the LED kind of shines through, and then the reverse, reverse mounted. Raspberry Pi Zero running everything. Capacitive touch. Here are the piezo. Where am I? Here, piezo speaker elements here. And then capacitive touch. So here I can like.
Not every geek with a Commodore 64 can hack into NASA.
So that's hack all the things by dual core. And then you can like change tracks. So here's another one in stereo. So,
that's brilliant.
And then you can stop it. And you can also, where's my tape? So you notice there's like a cutout here, and it's controlled depth milling. So it's actually different depths that have been milled out of the top side. Oh, it's really heavy. I don't think it's as heavy as like an actual boombox, but it's pretty heavy. So I have these cassette tapes that I put some magnets in, and there's some magnets on the back sides. There's 2 magnets here and then a reed switch. So I have different types of tapes, but you can put a tape in either for like aesthetic decorative, or it will automatically turn on the boombox with the one that triggers the reed switch and then start playing. But it's already powered on. So just kind of a fun thing to screw around with.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that was more of just like a show engineering, show the engineering process and do some art that's never been done and do some, crazy manufacturing. The boards cost, we didn't mention in the video, they were quoted as like $5,000 or $6,000 a piece.
Wow.
For fabrication alone.
Is this because of the size, or is it because of the solder masks because I was going to ask
everything,
about the solder masks.
So it was the size, so material cost, solder mask, because we have so many layers of it. It's a very manual process to do the solder mask, right? So they had to go through that many, many, many times. And then the via in pad, we had laser drilled via in pad,
right?
Which we needed some of them for the audio drivers because they're like micro VGA. And once I had those, I'm like, well, wait, if I need those anyway, let's just do 382 of them or however many there are. So that brought the cost up, but totally worth it. And made a couple and went to Hackaday SuperCon and showed that off and everything. But that was a fun thing to kind of, it was very hard engineering, like as any engineering project, right? It had all these problems and things that I wasn't expecting, but really satisfying again, to go from something in my head to something real. But now when I finished that, I'm like, all right, now I just want to go back to hacking stuff. Okay. And it kind of goes back and forth, right? It's like you're hardcore into one thing, do something else. But yeah, all this stuff is like still fun to me. I still like it. I'm super grateful that first of all, that people care about this stuff and that I'm able to share it. And that it's something that I can feel good about and help basically support my family with.
Yeah.
What else can I ask for?
That's fantastic. And so it sounded like it was a commissioned product from DDK almost.
Yeah. So they basically, it was more of like an engineering consulting project. So they covered the costs of everything, which was nice. And like, paid a small consulting fee. I wouldn't recommend that people, do that on a day-to-day basis. My goal really was to like, you basically use their stuff, try new techniques, but make the video, because I love making the videos, especially now that we have my partner, Fred, doing the video production, and his son, Freddie, who is they are both actual filmmakers. Having them basically make these videos in a way that people haven't seen before, right? Like a different type of style, and just production value is so good. The problem is now if I make a video like I used to with like my phone,
it's so
I think
obvious.
people are going to be really disappointed when I do that. So we've kind of set the bar a little bit high,
right?
Because I'm sure that they don't want to just make Joe Grand videos for the rest of their career. I would love it if they did.
We've had a couple of great comments from Devon's workshop. Thank you, by the way. So that's the thickest PCB I've ever seen. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then a follow-up question there. How many actual prototypes did you produce?
Great question.
Was there a kind of iteration, or was it first time lucked out and it worked?
Yeah. So no, I definitely made so first I did, I don't have it with me here, but first in the video, you can see it. I did like a, breadboard style wires everywhere to prototype different modules, make sure it worked. I did most of my software development on that. Then I did want to make a formal circuit board so I could test some of the pieces and the layout and everything, but not the artwork, not the size. So I made kind of a smaller square with the capacitive touch and all the pieces on it. That was still like a couple $1,000s for that because of the laser drilled vias.
Right.
And that was just a green, standard green circuit board. So we made, I think I made 3 bare boards and 1 assembled board, used that to test everything, and then went straight to that, which was bonkers. TDK wanted to show it at the Electronica show. So I think that was in October or November or something like that in Europe. And then they wanted to show it at CES in January, which they just did. So we had to get it done by that show. And the prototype, the prototype came back. It worked. I had to make a couple software changes and some tweaks. And then we just went straight to that board design, which was like, I don't even know how many dozens of hours, 100, 200, 300 hours. I don't know, a lot of hours. And I was designing that, the production version of the board while I was teaching in California for 3 weeks. So I would teach 8 hours a day, go back to my hotel. And then for like, from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m., what is that? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So like 6 or 7 hours, I'd lay out the board, did that for basically 3 weeks. And then we sent it out. So we had no idea. We worked very closely with the board fab though. So like they knew what we wanted it to look like. I put in all the notes they wanted, but we worked hand in hand with them to make sure that what we were getting back was actually the right thing. Otherwise, otherwise it would have been a disaster. But trying like the Z-axis, controlled depth milling and everything, was really, the risk was more on the fab, right? Because if they messed that up, they would have to start all over again.
Especially with all the communication that you'd put in.
Yes. Yeah. It was a lot. Very, very fun, but stressful, you could say.
Sure.
But once I got it back and it worked, oh boy. I was, in the video, you can see when my first unboxing, I opened it and I was just speechless. I couldn't believe it. Very fun.
You mentioned your training a couple of times now. Can you just sort of outline what it is you do with the training? It's your own material that you deliver to people. Is that right?
Yeah. So it started off at Black Hat 2005 when Jeff Moss, the Dark Tangent, was like, hey, I'm going to start doing training courses, as part of the conference, these 2-day trainings. And there was, network hacking, software stuff, web app. He's like, you should do one on hardware, because by that point I'd already designed, I hadn't done the DEF CON badge yet. That DEF CON badge came out of the circuit board that I created for my class. Okay. But he knew that I was a hardware hacker and I'd given some talks at Black Hat already about electronics and hacking. So he's like, do you want to do a hardware hacking training? And I'm like, is anybody even going to care? So I put together like a 2-day curriculum on, basically, it's changed over time since then because I still teach it, but it basically goes through the whole process of taking apart a product, getting access to the circuitry, identifying the components on the board, monitoring signals, what things to look at, debug interfaces, memory extraction, all the kind of what I consider basic hacking skills. And it turns out that people liked it. So after doing Black Hat in a public setting for a number of years, people who were taking the public class would go back to their organization and say, hey, can we have Joe come and teach it to the rest of our team? So I started doing private classes, and that just kind of was going in parallel with other stuff I was doing. Okay. And then that kind of branched out. So I have like the 2-day class, which is the basic. I have some 1-day classes on like hardware espionage, more firmware extraction techniques, code protection, defeating code protection. And those things I usually just do on request after a 2-day class. But it's fun. You know, I'll teach engineers. I'll teach people who have never seen electronics before. Everybody in between. It's just, it depends on the organization who brings me in. But it's very cool. Like, you know, that people actually are taking hardware a little more seriously these days. And I don't talk anything about properly designing secure systems, other than the fact that we talk about how nothing is 100% secure. And if, you know, a lot of securely designed systems do have problems, but they're probably better than insecurely designed systems. I just like the more offensive side, the more mindset side, because there are other people out there that are much more suited to help people properly design secure systems. But yeah, that's just never been my appeal, is more of the teaching people how to break things and
do it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I do that at public conferences, you know, maybe once or twice a year. I try to do something public. I don't control the pricing of the public events. We try to, you know, the conferences try to make it affordable enough for most people. But the good thing is all of the material that I teach in my classes is also available on my website, not as formal curriculum, but in the presentations I've given and in all the stuff I've done and the papers I've written. So everything's available for somebody that can't make it to a class. There's no secrets in the stuff, right? There's like no proprietary information that I'm only giving to people who pay money. Like, that's ridiculous. So it's all on my site, and people can, you know, get information from different places and use it. But really, like, for me, it's a cool way to kind of impart what piece I know to other people to maybe make a product more secure, or let them be able to hack on something that they need to hack on, or reverse engineer something. And, you know, again, it's that big snowball. It does a lot more good when the information is out in the world than just in my head.
Absolutely. What kind of sort of target audience do you have in mind, or who typically attends your training? Is it people in the security research sort of that kind of space, or is it forward engineering people?
It's been everybody.
Just want to be a bit better with their product design, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's been everything you could imagine. A lot of times, like if I go to a university and do it, it's going to be students that maybe are in computer security but don't really know what they want to do yet. It might be, you know, at Black Hat or any sort of security conference. It might be more security related people who maybe work at a company that need to understand the hacker process, either to design their systems better, but more often it's because they want to get paid to go hack somebody else's stuff.
Themselves. Got you.
And it's also very cool. Like when I see somebody who's in class who then, like, you know, 3, 4, 5 years later is hacking something and publicizing it, like, that's kind of cool. Or I've had friends of mine that are now friends of mine that were in class. And one of them was like, I took your class when I was a student, and now I'm designing circuit boards, you know, and that sort of thing is really cool because it just spreads, right? And he's going to go inspire other people and do these things. So again, I mean, that's the best part of it, right? It's like, what's the point of just existing in a bubble? But to be able to, like, to do some of this stuff as technical challenges and then talk about it is the best. Yeah.
Awesome. We got a question from Kay about your reverse engineering beginners, or for beginners, sorry. They'd like to know when you are holding another session, either in Europe or online. And if you are.
So online, a lot of people have asked if I do online trainings, and my answer has been no. Just because a lot of it's hands-on. I don't have this stuff with me, but I built this little microchip PIC-based circuit board that has basically a bunch of different things you need to do to it. And it has a security mechanism in it, and you have to reverse engineer it and figure out how it works and defeat the security, which nowadays you would call like a hardware CTF. But when I built it, like, there wasn't a name for it. And that circuit board, which is in the shape of my logo, was the inspiration for the first electronic badge at DEF CON.
Okay.
Because the Dark Tangent, who is running Black Hat and running the training, said, hey, you should design one of those for DEF CON. And that's what turned into the DEF CON 14 badge. which then was, I did 15, 16, 17, 18, and then 27 and DEF CON China. But that was sort of the start of it. So yeah, online, I just could never find a way to do the hands-on stuff in a way that I would like to do it that isn't totally weird. Of like, if somebody has a problem in a class, I can walk over and fix it. But online, it's much harder.
Sure.
Joe Fitzpatrick, another hacker friend of mine, does do online trainings. I can't remember what his website is offhand, but we'll put it in the notes.
Securely Fits or something?
Securinghardware.com, I think. Yes, at Securely Fits is his name. So he does a online course that's sort of self-guided, which is one way to do it. As far as being in Europe this year, I don't think so. I'm still talking to the folks at Hack in the Box who are doing Hack in the Box Thailand in Phuket, which I think they're going to announce in February. So we're just working out some of the technical details of that. And that's going to be in the summer in Thailand. So more of a destination conference, I would say, for most people, unless you happen to already live in Southeast Asia. But I'm excited about that because I've never been to Thailand. I would love to do that one. So that will probably be, it might be the only public one I'm doing. I'm not sure about Europe. If something comes up, then yeah, for sure. And I will post those on my website, grandideastudio.com. There's an events section. My website is really bad right now, by the way. I have an update that I have to review, and I just haven't had time to do it. But yeah, go to the events. Also, I have a Discord server now. I wanted to mention that. Yay. So my teenage son has been dying to get me onto a Discord server. And I had done a couple like live stream AMAs after the wallet hacking stuff. Right. And I had asked the chat, like, should I do a Discord? And people are like, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. And didn't think anything of it. But then over New Year's, my son basically set up the server, and it reminds me a lot of like running your own bulletin board system. Like it's actually kind of cool. So we set up like the channel names and set up the rules, and we got to ban people who have been impersonating me. And the hope with that server is because I'm not very responsive on email. I don't look at comments on Twitter or Facebook. Like I just can't do it for my mental health. It's not good for my mental health. And I know it, right? You always hear about like, don't read the comments. But then people still read the comments. Like I just don't, especially with some of the stuff that went viral. It's like, I just can't, take it. Especially because of the way I grew up is like, why would you want to put something negative into the world? And if you do, you better be able to back it up. Yeah. And nobody would say any of that in person. Right. So like just that whole internet culture, not a huge fan. So I was very hesitant with the Discord, but my son was like, yeah, but that way you have your own community. You can get messaging out there, right? If you have a live stream, you can post it. If you have something going on, you're bringing people together, they can talk. And then if somebody comes that you don't like, you just boot them. So it's a much more controlled thing. And it actually is like, it's really fun. So we'll put that in the link too. Everybody's welcome. And I'm actually surprisingly more active on it than I thought I would be. I think also because I'm doing that hacking project, staying up late at night and looking at the channel. Right. But still, writing is still my least favorite thing to do. So writing even responses on chat is hard. But yeah, it's a fun place. And I think we have like 300 people now. And I'm just hoping we get more and more people. So if somebody asks a question, somebody else will know an answer, right? So it's not like a lot of people come in just looking for me, but that's not the point. The point is to be able to communicate with each other and share techniques and share pictures of their pet or art or whatever. So kind of make it a fun community. And so far it's been pretty cool. So even put together some like regex to make sure that people can't ping me directly because it annoys the crap out of me. Because I see the little red, even if I turn my sound off, I see the little red indicator as I'm working and I'm like, oh, I got to go see it. Right. So it's really distracting. So we like put that on. So it's been fun to customize it. And my kids, both of my kids are moderators and another friend of mine is, and they love enforcing the rules. They love seeing the community grow. Like they think it's so cool. And it's fun. It's a fun project that we get to kind of do together. Yeah.
That's really nice. Actually, I hadn't appreciated the family aspect as well.
No, I had not considered that would have been the thing that kind of had brought us all together. Like all three of us doing Discord. But it's really, really fun.
We got Devin back again. Thank you.
Yes.
I think Discord
Exactly.
works so well because it's basically like IRC in a way with voice option and without the spam.
Yeah, I mean, I spent most of my youth on IRC as well, right? And
Yeah.
I try to explain that to my kids. I'm like, back in my day, we just had text. But it basically is. It's like a fancier IRC.
Without all the,
and I really enjoy I like providing that venue, and hopefully more people come to it. But I think you're right. It's like, and I like how you can just jump around to different channels, and a lot of times you see the same people or in the different servers, like same people, different servers, because we're all kind of connected to all these different groups. But yeah, I mean, it really is fun, even though I get so distracted that I do close it a lot and I close my email, I close everything if I actually need to get work done. Otherwise, I'll just stare at it the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. When's the next message coming?
Yeah. Why is nobody talking?
Amazing. Okay. Have we got any sort of projects or things you'd like to shout out about before we say goodbye? I think we're kind of coming close to the end.
Yeah, let's see. We did actually film some new footage for a different wallet hacking project.
Okay.
Some amazing and hilarious footage. We don't know if we're going to use it. We're still working on the project. We don't know if it will be successful. We released a video that, was not as successful after the Trezor wallet hack. So we don't want to have too many bummers in the way of like these videos, but we did film some really good stuff. So that might be coming if we're successful. I don't actually know if I'm allowed to say anything, but I'm actually going to be in a cryptocurrency related movie.
Okay.
That's in production. So I'm going to have a little cameo in that actual film.
Yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'll definitely let people know about that. That's going to be
so is that done now? You've done your piece and it's
no, we're doing it actually in a couple weeks.
Okay. I was going to ask
which is funny because I'm not an actor. I'm not an actor at all, but they basically are like, just be yourself. You're just going to be a different character, but you're still going to do what you talk about anyway, which is very weird. It's going to be really fun.
Amazing.
Yes, that'll be fun. And what else is coming up? Stay tuned for the Thailand thing if that happens. But yeah, I would just say get on Discord to keep track of everything. And I am on Twitter and I am on Mastodon, not really active on those, but I will cross post on both. I was going to get off Twitter, but I still I just leave it up. But Mastodon definitely is much more of a clean, easy interface where we actually get to see what each other is posting as opposed to relying on the algorithm. But yeah, I think what else? I'm looking around and like, no, I think that's it.
Well, yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, and everyone else as well.
Yes, thanks for having me. Thanks for people coming and asking questions, and we'll see you around.
It's been brilliant to hear your story.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, hope people enjoyed it.
Next week we'll be talking with Bradley Gawthrop, but for now, that's bye-bye from us.
Cool. See you.